You're gonna have to start recording now. We don't want to miss the underwear conversation.
I know. You should call in if you've got cell service.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So how is everybody today? Doing all right? Doing all right? I am happy people showed up because I thought, I don't know if I'm going to get anyone to show up if I say I'm going to talk about crying. Because we have so many hang-ups and thoughts and beliefs that are projected onto the act of crying. You know, if we're women, you know, we're hysterical or too emotional. Men are told that, you know, it's not a masculine thing to do, get it together. And what's really interesting is that I've read a lot about women who thought they were really you know, really supportive and open to men sharing emotions, and then they share that when they actually did cry in front of them, or that they had this horrified reaction to it. Like they reacted to it completely different than they thought they would. And then they had all this guilt and shame about the fact that here I am trying to create this, you know, invitation and space for my husband or partner to come in and be authentic. And then when they are, I find out that, oh, maybe I'm not a safe place because I have judgments about it. And what does that tell you? There's a subconscious message that we've got over the course of our life about what it means. So the way you want to show up, which is your true self, and you're saying, no, I want to create this, then hits up against the conditioning that you've had, or that we all have had. And now, wait, what's happening? Here I am. I'm one of these, you know, progressive women. And I just was horrified that my husband had tears. So we have a lot of stuff that we project onto crying. And I've really did a little bit of research about this because I thought that was really, there's so much interesting stuff. If you Google, you know, what does crying do for me, or what, you know, what is the purpose in crying, you will find amazing research around this. And a lot of it feels very much like, you know, Brene Brown, when she talks about being vulnerable, right? She says that we feel like it's a weakness, but other people see it as courage. And we kind of have that internal dichotomy going on around crying. A lot of us have that mug. I think I told you that already, Amanda. Have that mug. I'm sorry, the ADD squirrel. Anyway, so people avoid crying because they think it'll make them feel worse, but actually it makes you feel better. And crying actually can improve your mood, lower stress levels, help improve sleep, and it strengthens your immune system. Crying is the body's safety valve. Keeping difficult feelings inside is called repressive coping, and it's bad for your health. On average, these are just some statistics, and some of the stuff is from Harvard Health. Like, these are all very, very good sources. But on average, women cry several times a month, while men only cry once every month or two. By concentrating on what's happening in your body, you can release pent-up trauma-related energy through shaking, crying, and other forms of physical release. And this is what I really wanted to talk about, because I've experienced this myself, and I have experienced this with clients, which is they can be doing the active be in the active state of crying, but not really getting the benefit as much as they could, because crying can feel like we're out of control because it's coming over us. It's this feeling that's coming up, and we may have an association that, oh, now I'm going to feel it's all going to come at once. I'm going to be overwhelmed if I allow the tears. I don't want to feel out of control. I don't want to. So I may be actively crying, but the internal dialogue is, I need to get it together. I need to stop this. I need to get the lid back on the jar. Okay, let's get this over with. Or it's not a good time. Let me do this another time, because people are going to see me later and I don't want my eyes all red. People ask, we put all this stuff on it. And it's that kind of taps into that, what you resist persists. So then the tears don't get to give you the release that they had the potential to do had you tapped in. So what does tapped in look like? Well, if tears are coming up, it may be that why the tears are coming up, because it's related to something that is happening in that moment or just happened. So there is a real connection to why the tears are coming up. Or it could be that you just saw a picture frame of somebody that you just saw something beautiful on your morning walk. It could be something that is not so specifically connected, and suddenly the tears are coming. And leaning into that and going, where does this come from? How do I follow the thread and really connect to what is trying to move through me right now and be released through my tears? And then you can actually get the most out of that. And believe me when I tell you, you will not get washed away. You may be ugly crying, you may be shaking, but it doesn't last. It doesn't last. And what happens, emotional tears contain proteins and hormones that you won't find in any other type of tear, meaning the lubricating tears or the tears you might produce, like when you're cutting an onion, something that makes you tear up. And it contains stress hormones. So this is why it's such a cleansing for trauma and emotional release, because it's literally carrying it out of your body. And if you've ever really seen if you've ever had situations where you allowed yourself to cry because for whatever reason, you gave yourself permission, it was a big enough thing, however it went, you can probably remember how cleansing that was to be able to do. If you've had that experience. So then we go further and we don't have our permission slip. And now we behave differently. So tears are directly connected to our limbic system. And the limbic system is the emotional area of the brain. This is really important. I'll tell you a quick story, and forgive me if I've told it before. I might have told it before, but I had a client who was crying though she wished she would stop crying. And she was in residential treatment. And she had this constant, she was crying a lot, but it would just eke out here and there. It wasn't a full-on go into it cry. And so I was watching her to, battling this, and I said, you're so afraid that it's going to swallow you. But why don't you take this weekend and just allow yourself to lay in bed, lay on the couch, watch Netflix, eat junk food, whatever it is that you feel that you need to do. Give yourself permission and just let yourself cry all weekend, with the idea that on Monday, right, that this is my crying date. I'm making a date with crying for the weekend. Have you guys ever heard of a grief schedule? So a lot of this can be really helpful when you have overwhelming grief, to create a grief schedule, which says, maybe it's not possible for you to cry all day long, but you also do have to cry and feel and process. Maybe you're a parent. Wim Hof talked about his wife. I don't know if you know his story, but his wife committed suicide, and they had 3 young children. And he was absolutely devastated. But he recognized that he had to both be able to process the trauma of it and his sadness, but he had to be able to also show up for his children. How do I do both? Because, a lot of times in those situations, the secondary trauma is the children lose their other parent too, because that parent is in such deep grief. So he created a grief schedule where he would put his grief away and make breakfast and get the kids off to school or do whatever he had to do. And then this period of time, he can break down. And full permission to break down, in scream, run, bawl his eyes, whatever he needed to do. And then when that session's over, now we start to put ourselves back together, because maybe now the kids are coming home, or now I need to do some work. And it sounds a little crazy, but it works. It works. It's not perfect, but it works. So I gave this client permission to have a date with her pain and let herself cry all weekend. And I didn't know about as much about it as I do now. It was more like just a gut feeling that this would help her. And when I showed up to work on Monday and her whole team, was there, it was like she was glowing. She was so radiant. I can't even tell you. She looked 10 years younger. She was floating through the halls. She was just beaming. And I saw her on the Saturday in bed with all the food around her, with the remote in her hand, with the tissues everywhere. So, and I remember saying to her after talking about and discovering how wonderful that was, and she was amazed by it. Everyone was amazed. I was amazed by it. I didn't expect it to be that profound. But I did tell her, I reminded her that, remember, the body it's not releasing everything. So you had a weekend. You didn't get rid of it all. Don't think like now it's done. Go back into that type A personality, did it, done, check that box, it's over. It's going to come back. It's going to build up. It'll give you time typically, but it will build up again. Can you give yourself permission? And by permission, it's not that you won't feel shame. It's not that you won't judge it. It's that you are now taking a leadership role around those thoughts and feelings, so that when they come up, you can gently and lovingly go, I understand why you're here. I understand what messages you got that told you that this is not okay. But I'm here for you now. I'm in control now. I'm calling the shots. And we're just going to let you feel. I think a lot of times this is a great inner child exercise, because when we think about ourselves as children, when we can get a picture of us as a child, we can really access that empathy and kind of remember what it felt like to not feel like we could cry and feel our emotions. Which comes back to that whole Gabor Mate when he talks about when you were a kid, who was your safe harbor? It's not to say that your parents were bad, or who was your safe harbor? Did you have that when you were hurt or dysregulated or upset or any of those things? Did you feel that you had a person? It could be a grandparent, could be an aunt and uncle, doesn't have to be your parents. Did you have a person that you could go to that you knew loved and supported you and would listen and provide that safe harbor for you? And a lot of us didn't. And not because our parents were bad. It's just because they probably didn't have it either. So they didn't, how can you give what you never got? But it's really important for our development and our ability. It's funny, our ability to handle stress, right? And our ability to process. See, if I don't grab thoughts right when they happen, that's why I jump all over the place. Well, it'll probably come back at some point. Does anybody, I know I've been talking for a little while. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask or anything they want to add from their own personal experience?
I think, as you were just talking about, our parents were doing the best that they could. And it's funny because my mom and I we've always been really close, and having gone through a lot of my own processing and deeper understanding, I recognize that while it was unspoken in our house and I didn't realize it at the time, she was the breadwinner and she made a lot of money, and she had to put herself as a woman into, I'm going to say, a more robotic world, because or toxically masculine world. She was in sales. She was in, she had her own business that was very cutthroat, and it wasn't an option. She didn't feel like it was an option for her. And so that's what I'm doing a lot of unraveling around over the last few years. And I can laugh about it now because there was a really pivotal moment where it all came to a head. And I joke because I swear every time I am doing some sort of event with Robin and Warwick, like, I am in tears, oftentimes ugly crying. And the second day of the clinic that I took my very first horse to, and I was so excited. He looks over with this, big smile. He's like, "How are we doing today?" And I lost it in front of, whatever, 75, 100 auditors. Couldn't breathe. It's one of the ugliest cries I've ever had in my life. But it was a tipping point for me to realize that was okay. Because I had not just Warwick and the gal that I was with in that particular session, but like everybody there holding space. And I'd never had that really before, or I'd never given myself permission to accept it. But, to your point earlier, I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm here for you. And then when you do break down, they don't know what to do because we feel like we're supposed to make things better. And so I've tried to be aware of that, giving myself permission and space to cry as needed. I'm very lucky now that I have a boss who's also a huge Brene Brown person.
Yes.
So we talk about all sorts of stuff like this. And so it's been a very interesting evolution through my own personal journey. Like I work for a phenomenal company right now, and there have been times where I have wanted to just cry in meetings, whether it be out of sheer frustration or whatnot. And it's like, all right, I've got to keep it together here. But man, as soon as that meeting was over, because I work from home, I'm like, I don't have anything afterwards. Sometimes I've even rescheduled things to be like, I've got to process this right now.
That's great. That's great that you have the ability to do that, because yeah, that's important to grab. If you can grab that in real time, because it's like a portal just opened.
Yeah. And like you said too, like sometimes it doesn't all come out at one point. Like I remember there was one time, and it took a couple of days of really like sitting with it and rolling around in it, trying to understand like, why am I still feeling hurt, and trying to understand the emotions? Because sometimes, for me at least, one of the hardest things is to actually name the emotion that I'm feeling, which I was very lucky to have a therapist. There's this like really cool wheel of emotions or something.
Yeah.
I love that thing.
Yeah.
So every time, like I pull that out, and I try to be really conscious, especially when I'm around kids, and I can tell that there's something, off. And I'm like, well, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm fine. Okay, well, hang on. Fine isn't a feeling. Let's be clear on that, because I truly am interested. And there's a difference between everything is actually fine and I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it is also a valid response. Like you can say that. And I've tried to be better about that in my own life, because I can be the queen of I'm fine.
That was my favorite word as a kid. Anytime anybody said fine.
I know. And I've had to go back several times, I know, and correct myself with my husband and say, like, I know I said I'm fine. I know you know that I am not fine, and I don't want to talk about it right now.
Right.
And sometimes I just need to have my own little temper tantrum and cry and process it on my own. 9 times out of 10, that's usually the case.
I had a therapist in high school that said FINE was an acronym for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
That sums it up. That sums it up nicely.
Yeah. But I will try to remember. I made a note for myself when I send out the email with the recording of this, to include a link or a PDF for the emotional wheel, so that you all can have that too. It's really quite interesting to use, because it makes you sometimes trying to connect with how I feel about something can be the most frustrating thing. I don't, because especially when you grow up and part of the way you cope is by skimming over it, dissociating it from it, intellectualizing it. So when someone asks, well, how does that make you feel? I can feel like I'm in a corner, trying to, I don't know, but that wheel can really help. That's a good one, Shannon. And Shannon, you said something. You said, at sometimes have cried and then I'll think, why am I still feeling blank, whatever it was? Why am I still feeling this? And
Mhm.
I think that that's just a real covert inner question that has the weight of, when are you going to be done with this?
And that's definitely how it used to be. And, you know, especially growing up as a competitive gymnast, which is, I've got a lot of stuff to unpack from that. But it's now it is, the tone is different. You know, it's like, so
Oh, I see.
how come, but it used to be like that. It's like, come on, woman, let's get over it. We got to move on to the next thing. Gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. We don't have time for this crap. But now I've been, you know, through this journey and, you know, through connecting with, you know, people like everybody on this call and becoming more aware, it is, so how come you're feeling this way? And what is it that you should probably sit with and have a cup of tea with?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting because it can come out with the same words inside my head, but the intention behind it is different. Because I'm a real root cause person. I really, really, really like to and almost need to understand the root cause of things so that I can then, you know, either put it apart or put it back together or whatever that is, to help it make sense in my brain. And I'm working on the fact that sometimes things just don't make sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll say that, like, this past year, this is interesting. I decided to kind of delve into like a relationship with crying, as far as like having it be really conscious. I've always been a very easy crier, but I don't know that it was that I had any consciousness of what was happening. It would just kind of and most of the time my crying was centered around anger. Like, if I'm angry and frustrated, that's when I will cry the most. But one of the things I think too, it's a learning process. Like, you can't just say, I'm going to start crying more. It doesn't happen that way. So for me, the things I started doing first was never apologizing. I consciously said, I'm never, ever again going to apologize for crying. But then I also realized I was still sending out the preemptive strike. I'm going to cry. Like, I had to prepare that just so I could prepare that other person. So now I've identified that I had been doing that. And so I don't even do that anymore, because what I'm trying to do is, like, have control over how they may be feeling about it by doing that. And I don't want to be doing that anymore. So those two things have really helped me. And like, when I'm in the middle of like oh, okay, what am I feeling right now? Unsupported or frustrated or angry, or I didn't get my way, or, you know, whatever those things are. But I have realized that even though I felt like I cried a lot around some big grief things, I would usually do it in the shower or in my car where no one else was around, because I didn't like upsetting other people with the crying. So I would remember, like, purposely holding back so that other people weren't upset. And so those are the preemptive kind of things I've been looking at, like not apologizing, not going, I'm so sorry, while in the middle of crying, and also not doing the, I'm going to cry. Like, just so you know, you better prepare yourself, put the right face on so I can handle it or you can handle me.
Right.
Yeah. And then, you know, I have Charlie here, and I was thinking about the, you know, when we have, you know, the conditioning for when we have a man in our life and we want them to be more emotional or all those kinds of things. And
Got it.
I don't know if you heard that. He just said, well, you got it. Because he's
Good.
very emotional. Crying is not a thing for him. But I have been in situations where I see how other people don't know what to do. Like, they're okay if I cry.
Yeah.
But they're not sure what to do when he starts crying. And then I'm like, oh, are they thinking that this makes him weak?
Right.
And I told him, you're one of the bravest men I've ever met, because he's willing to just cry in front, like snot nose cry in front of people. And it's so brave to be able to do that. But I have seen other people not know how to handle it. And then I was also thinking about my own daughter and stepdaughters. I remember I stopped going to the movies at some point, because whenever something would pop up on a screen that would make people cry, here's my kids waiting. They would wait to see if I was crying, but yet they didn't. So I don't know what I don't know. I don't know, or what the stronger influence was in their life, that the crying wasn't okay, even though I was a crier and I was showing emotions about something like that. So I was thinking about how we can, take in all those signs from the world that we don't even realize we've taken in, or we don't know what other people are taking in. So it's been interesting journey.
Well, yeah, like when you said, if Charlie shows emotion like that, people don't know what to do. And that's, I think right in there is, we all, I believe, understand how crying can make other people so uncomfortable. And I think on a lot of different levels. On one, oh my gosh, you're doing the thing. You're doing the thing we're all trying to keep in, and now you're doing it in public right out here. What do we do? What do we do? Like, this is not what we're supposed to do.
I don't know if it's taught for men or what, but how do I get you to stop crying used to be the thing.
Yeah.
Right? Get a tissue, hug them, whatever it is it takes to
Turn the faucet
turn off the faucet, And then with one of the groups that I've worked with over the years, you'd get in trouble if you handed somebody a tissue while they were crying, because they were having that experience, and then you knew whatever your brain went to helping them, and that took them out of what they were doing. So let that flow for them, or let that go, was something I learned a while back.
Well,
but I've run into plenty of men that don't know what the fuck to do with me when I cry.
Yeah.
But friends, battalion chiefs, firefighter guys, big tough guys that told you to suck it up, buttercup, and all that stuff. And then you're in their office going, this sucks. I'm out of here. I had a battalion chief when I asked to leave the fire department that I was like, this just hurts my heart. And I started crying, and he couldn't get me out of his office fast enough. He didn't know what to do with a sobbing.
Well, he was probably afraid that you were going to make him come in contact with what he's holding in. Like, this could be contagious. Get this guy out of here. You might break down all of the containers that I have holding all of this in.
And I'm just sitting here thinking, even in my mind sometimes, and I think I've said this out loud too, like, I will hug him and go, oh, my big softie. But there's that thing, right? He's not being a big softie. He's just being Charlie. Just being
It's your
in the moment. But there's that conditioning that I've even attached that to it. Even though I'm a safe space for him, I'm still attaching those things to it that you're a softie if that's happening. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's an unconscious. This stuff is an unconscious programming that we've got from every angle. There's and what happens if a kid cries in class? They take them out.
Yeah.
Like we've been getting this our whole lives. And we don't want to see your tears. The idea now that I love the idea that people are starting to get clearer around what support looks like to someone who is crying, and that it is not on you to get the person to stop crying, because the thought being that stop crying is what they're looking for, but really they're looking for a safe place to release what they've been carrying. And you guys remember that poem from The Invitation, and there's a line in this poem that says, I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fix it or fade it. And I felt like that piece was so powerful, because I may be the one that's crying, but I am being in congruence with what I'm feeling. You're the one that might be having a harder time. Can you sit with that? And I think that, I think we lost Jane, but Jane and Amanda were at the retreat that we did at Warwick's, and the thing about that retreat that I think was one of the most powerful ingredients was, I think we were able to create the safe space we were talking about, the safe harbor that we talk about when you're a kid, where you could go and you could just be completely who you are in that moment and share your ugly, share your frustration, share your sorrow, and that person or those people will actually sit with it without, there's no rush to get away from it. There's no, and having created that, you didn't have to do anything to bring up emotion in people. Just being in that energy, people realized how much they had been carrying, how tightly they had been holding it together, and all of a sudden you could let that down and things just came out.
I think that there was so much acceptance in the group that it did feel just completely safe to let anything come. You know, and that being said, listening to all this stuff, I almost never cry unless I'm watching a sad movie or something, but in like with life, and I don't know why that is. It makes me feel like there's something I'm doing wrong.
I would just say, if you're aware of that, look for the moments that you may be unconsciously turning away from. And a lot of the times that can be action-based, right? We keep busy, we keep it moving, we never stop, we never like have the quiet time or sit with things that are uncomfortable. We look for, what can I do, where can I go, or I have to do something. So all I would say is, this is your adaptive child learned that this was the best way for you to deal with emotional things by suppressing them. So it's not that you're doing anything wrong at all, but just try to start looking. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll cry. Don't do it because now you have to perform. Right? Just start looking for moments. Wow, that hurt. And I realized as soon as I felt that hurt, I turned and started doing the dishes, or I turned and went and distracted myself.
That sounds a lot like me. Yeah, the sadder and angrier I am, the more the cleaner my house is.
Yeah. Yeah. So the feelings are probably right under there. So if you maybe even just noticing them, maybe even just journaling if you can, and believe me, journaling is a muscle. Uh, People go, oh, I'm not good at journaling. It's kind of like when people say I'm not good at meditating, because you have all these feelings inside and you're like, yes, I'm going to get this out onto paper. And then your journal entry says, I had eggs for breakfast. And I went outside and I saw my horses and it was really pretty. You're like, wait, I have all of this stuff and like I can't get it on the page because it takes time to get that skill. So you have to be willing to be bad at it in the beginning, and you're just going to write, you're going to end up writing really surface stuff. But if you stick with it and you keep doing it, you'll start to access the other stuff, will start to come out. It'll start to come out.
And I do journaling, and especially when I have a mix of emotions I can't sort out, I throw them out on the paper. That's kind of my go-to is that.
Maybe try to do the journaling when you start to see how you catch yourself redirecting as to not feel. Maybe try doing the journaling right at that moment. Before.
Yeah, but then I'm too busy. Just,
no.
Just kidding.
No. That's a good story, Jane.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I call it rage cleaning, and it usually happens when no one else is home. So I will verbally journal as I'm rage cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I have way too much energy in my body right now because I am so angry, usually about something that is totally irrelevant. But it's it's straw that broke the camel's back. And then I just have this running monologue as I'm cleaning. Sorry, my dog needs help getting up.
Oh.
Funny how many shoulds we have a lot of shoulds around crying, like we do rest, and there's a thing about like, if you're resting, but you're shoulding yourself, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing the dishes. I should be taking the dog for a walk, or I should be doing stuff. Then your rest is not actually, it actually isn't good for you to do it. And you didn't get anything out of it. And that's why you're still tired, because you didn't rest. And the crying is the same way. If you're crying, but you're shoulding yourself, then right, you're not getting all those benefits that you talked about. When we're shoulding all over ourselves for anything, then all the things that we think we're supposed to be getting from it, and then that would lead you back to, I already cried about this 10 times. But if you shoulded yourself those whole 10 times, then yes, of course, this is why it's still presenting. I say no crying and smiling in my safe moment.
Oh, that's good. My safe spot to cry is about halfway between here and Fresno, which is a 3-hour drive away in my car. I drove that as a kid because I have family over there all the time. And I remember like one day going, like once I started driving myself, I realized I would always cry there and back. And I wasn't like crying because I was going there or crying because I was coming home. I was just like crying about life and thinking. And so, yeah, my sweet spot is about an hour and a half in my car alone in the middle of nowhere. That's where I guess I feel safe to cry. But I learned so much on these calls because I was reflecting on my mom crying as a child, and she was a really big crier, but her cries were deeply rooted in emotional pain and depression and suicidal thoughts. And so I was always like, where is she crying? What, just analyzing, how is she looking? And if she was crying, I was on it. I was there to comfort. I was there to try to fix. I was there to try to make sure it wasn't going to go deeper, because deeper was scary. Mm-hmm. And just like reflecting on that, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's the emotion, those are the stories I have in my brain of like, it is so scary to go deeper because deeper leads to fatal, and so like crying for me, it feels really good, but it's hard for me to get there and to get deep in. Like I can cry if I'm watching a movie or something, but even then I'm like, nobody better see me cry, I don't want anybody to see me. Let's not get into hard as I can. My husband, though, he's a crier. He will cry at like a commercial. But yeah, so, and I'm super comfortable with other people crying, but not like myself in front of people. And that whole loss of control, that fear of, you know, what happens if I can't control myself, or like just, yeah, it's a process. And when I was a kid, my safe place was my horse. I would go out and I would just cry to him, and I would talk to him, and he was, you know, he was strong enough to handle it, but not my mom, not my, you know, home. That was like, I had to be strong in there. So I've kind of carried that into life. And yeah, at the retreat, I was like, my body was like, it's time to release. My brain was not ready to like let go, but my full-on body had a emotional response because it was so safe. And so it decided for me, like, it was time to let go. So that was just such a beautiful gift and learning moment. And now I'm like, okay, here's another phase of my journey of healing and learning. Like, I need to learn how to receive, how to be vulnerable. I thought I was vulnerable, but actually the depth of vulnerability, I've realized I'm not actually vulnerable. There's a wall right there that's even scary for my own self to go to. So I can't go there alone. I have to go there with people. And that's just a foreign concept. So yeah, this is such a good topic. And sorry, my dog was, there a firecracker went off somewhere. I think it was my husband. He's in trouble. But my dog was freaking out a while ago. Great topic. I love it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And maybe this might apply to other people too. What you described with your mom, right, is that you grew up with someone who themselves was emotionally dysregulated, which meant as a child, you had to be your mother's emotional regulation. And the association with tears and going into something bad, plus the correlation between being out of control, because now you see your mother as being out of control. She's not in control of her emotions. She's not in control of her thoughts. She's thinking suicide. She's thinking all these things. When I grow up, this is not who I'm going to be. Right? I'm going to be the opposite of this. I'm going to be in control. I'm going to have it all together, because my mother was exactly the same. Luckily, I was mostly raised by my grandmother, but that was, I can remember thinking, I'm going to be nothing like you. You are, you're too much everywhere. You suck all the life out of every room with your dramatic, and your pain, you got to put it on everybody else. It's like, there was this whole thing that I remember as a teenager going like, that is not going to be me. I'm not going to go around looking like that. But then you overcorrect. And now, gee, I have a harder time. I used to think that I was really good. I was the opposite of like insecure. I thought like, I'm really good at this. I cry, but what I did was I cried to let the pressure valve off. Like, I would cry and I would allow it. I had my permission slip. I can cry now because X plus Y equals Z. I can cry. But moving on from there and being connected to how I feel and more in my like day-to-day or other things, I'm just not able, like, somebody else had said, I can't just cry on cue. Some people can, right? Because they're holding it so close, and which can be a gift and be, a struggle at times too. But I can't just cry. That's why when I do cry, when something connects me to my emotion, I will pull the car over. I will, whatever. It's like, give it to me. let me go in. What is this connected to? It feels like it's this, but oh wait, there's a domino, and then I was a kid, and then that happened, and then oh my gosh, this goes all the way back. I never let myself feel any of this, and I'll bring it on and just ugly cry, whatever, yell, scream, whatever, just let it out. And all these endorphins get released in your brain, in your body, and like that, it's the opposite of what you think. So yeah, I totally get that, you know. And sometimes, like, I understand with people when we talk about crying, it's not like it doesn't mean the person's sitting there actively trying not to cry. This is a subconscious system that's been created.
When you said that about the pressure cooker, all I could picture was like an actual pressure cooker. And if you have something in it, and then it's time to release the pressure went out, but the something in it,
Yeah.
that piece of meat or whatever it is still in there. And then we just add more and turn it back on again. And then we just let the pressure out, and all that stuff in there just keeps staying in there, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we are. That's who we are.
I could do the release valve, but
Yeah, exactly. Manual
I
or
didn't think about anything else being in there. I thought I did it. Good for me.
and it's funny because the Instapot, you either manually release it or naturally release it. I'm like, Oh.
Sheena, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was thinking about my parents and my family. And I don't remember really anyone showing any emotion. My stepdad would cry like when he would get a really nice card or at Christmas. And it was always like this thing, like he didn't want to cry. It was just coming out. So the whole time he was trying not to, and everybody felt weird about it. But I've always had a hard time crying. And recently have been just trying to step into it. But I also feel what Amanda said about getting almost like you're going to get too close to the darkness sometimes. So yeah, that was interesting. That resonated. And I think that's kind of why I resist it at times. So it's just one of those, really trying to step into the storm to go through it.
Yeah, that there's that saying that what you resist persists. And I think that I totally understand, because if that's the way you function, or any of us function, intellectually, we also know I got a lifetime in there. Like, this isn't like I got to process what happened last week. Like, this goes all the way back. So the dam holding that together, I'm afraid if I start to let a little out, the whole structure is just going to wash away, and I'm going to be a puddle on the floor for the rest of my life.
Exactly. Yep.
Michelle?
Yeah, like okay, so I jumped in late, and then I was kind of back and forth and not fully here with you guys. But what I did catch was, it seems like there's definitely an overwhelming amount of people that have, like, you know, the struggle to cry and connect with that part, which I have no issue with. The complete opposite. In fact, crying was my go-to. And it was the only way, like, when things would get intense, it was the only release I had. And like, I actually had a friend once that was like, oh my God, are you going to cry again? Are you going to cry again? Like, that's how we're going to solve this. And it's like, I get overwhelmed, and I have no problem with my release valve. But it's so funny, Bridget, when you said all the stuff stays in there, I was like, oh my God, that's friggin' brilliant. Because I'll release it, I'll cry, and I'll get that level of emotion out. But I didn't then go in, and it's kind of where I'm at in my life right now. I literally swear to God this morning was like, okay, I need a therapist. I need a therapist on a weekly basis. I cannot do this by myself because there's so much intensity going on, and I can cry about it and I can get angry and I can do releasing on my own, but like getting to the meat that's in the pot, like, oh, girl. Yeah.
That's one of the things that we what we were talking about was that aspect that you're saying, like you can connect with the tears when the pressure release is there, right? But it's the idea of can we then sit with the pain? Can we then excavate the pain? Can we go, wait, this feels familiar. What other times have I felt this very thing? How far back can I remember? Might not be the first time that this happened to me, but how far back can I remember feeling this way?
Yeah.
And just allow yourself permission to let it go. You probably didn't let it go back then. You probably had to, soldier on. And that way, it just allows the tears to move more of the energy and the emotions, more of I was saying about how tears actually carry hormones and proteins out of the body that are connected with stress. It literally is how you move the energy. But
Right.
I think that how effective that is has a lot to do with how we feel around the crying. Are we connecting to it, or are we trying to suppress?
I feel like there's other emotions that are, guaranteed attached to those tears, right? Like I think we cry and, we think like, oh, I'm sad and, this is hard and all the things. But like, I think specifically for me, maybe other people too, there's rage, that, and the crying just tends to be like the only way to release. And it's like, okay, I got it out. And it's like, no, bitch, you did not get it out. Like, because what's in there wants to take a baseball bat and beat up a car, which by the way, I might go to a rage room if anyone wants to join me. Like $100 and they literally give you a baseball bat and a whole bunch of things to break, which is like, sounds amazing to me.
What is a rage room? I have never
Oh,
heard of that
really?
before.
Oh, yeah.
Look it up. Rage room. I don't know if we're in Los Angeles proper, but like there's a few of them. It's like $100. They give you goggles and they film the whole thing too, so that you can watch it back, which is fun too. And I haven't done it yet, but there's like different levels. And I think the base level is like $100 and you go in and they give you like 10 items to break and a baseball bat.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like a big package where they'll give you like a car, like a beat up car. And the people have parties. Right now. People have parties. I think they might have axe throwing and like paint splashing and all kinds of, yeah, man, rage room. I think it's on the
with like old computers and
yes.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
We should have a First Fridays rage party.
Yeah,
there's a rage room in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do that as an extra like little side thing? I'll totally organize it.
Yep.
It's funny.
Fascinated by this now.
I think that there is definitely conflicting ideas in the mental health community or opinions around rage rooms. And I think it totally depends on the person and how they're utilizing it, because someone could use a rage room and just get out stuff that they're holding, when someone else could use a rage room and have it break down the barrier between feeling and taking action on that rage. Because now that you've done it, do you see what and I think
sure, if you're not mentally stable and not like seeing a therapist, you probably shouldn't, but like,
I
Right.
can tell you taking a bat to someone's car doesn't always make you feel better. I'm gonna leave that another day.
I mean, Carrie
Oh.
Underwood might disagree, but
Bridget, we're gonna need to know the story.
It wasn't.
I forgot about that.
Christine,
Great.
you mentioned, like, I don't know if you really said this, but I flashed to where I cried as a kid. I started getting flashes of the garage at the house I grew up in, and I don't know what that is yet, but when you said that, I just flashed to my youth and being in the dark corner of the garage. I
Yeah.
don't remember feeling that in another part of the house there, but that maybe that's my spot. I don't know.
It very well, probably. I think that as kids, we find a safe space that we go to be able to cry. I just recently got trained in this new modality, well, new to me, that is just, it's so amazing. And I think it's actually really helpful to people who have a hard time crying, because it can start moving some of that pressure of it away, so that there's lighter feelings that can be processed. It's called, if you ever want to look it up, it's called IEMT. And what it does is it allows you to release the emotional charge around memories. So you can still remember the memory, but through a series of eye movements and through this process, you release by moving the memory around the brain. It's really fascinating. By moving that memory around the brain, it moves it out of the area that holds the charge, and it breaks the charge up. And I just started work. I got trained in this like about a month ago, and I've been using it with clients, and every single client is just like, what the hell just happened? Like, I can remember it, but I can't get that same sharp focus feeling memory that was the thing. I can tell you what happened, but I don't have that emotional connection to it. And a lot of times what will happen is that if you clear that one, oh, that led to this one. The reason that one was so hard because this, right? Because of this thing, this other event that happened. And then you can clear the emotion from that. So, and once that happens, it can actually start to organize in your mind a little bit more of maybe what you're holding on to. You can get a sense of lightness and more clarity around your feelings, which can make them feel not so overwhelming.
Do you ever find, like, I almost would be afraid of it, you know, like, if that makes sense, afraid to look at those things more clearly? Do you think almost like a coming out of a shutdown? Do you think that's kind of, my therapist has been telling me to do this for like a year. She gave me a book and I haven't read it because I'm like, this is terrifying. I don't know if I want to look at that. But I also, you know, she's like, preaches by it, and I've heard it's coming into my life multiple different ways, so I'm like, okay, I think I need to listen. But I think what's most terrifying is just like revisiting things and feeling them. Maybe that's it. I'm afraid to feel them.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I have people start with light things. Like, we don't go like, let's talk about the day your dad died, you know, like, you don't, that's not how this works. Sorry. How this works is you start off with a lighter association to a memory. You know, like I had the reason that I actually got trained in this, because if anybody in here is, you know, into self-help or mental health, or as you would know, there's more modalities out there than you could even ever process. And I've toyed with other ideas of training and other things other than hypnotherapy, and I realized that nothing ever really grabbed me, but there was a woman that I actually know through someone else that said, look, if you want to do this, I'll come over to my booth and we'll do it when everybody's in class or whatever. So I did. And oh my gosh, I worked on a stage fright thing that happened that was a full-on feeling in my body. And I used to be able to talk in front of a room, and all of a sudden that thing happened, and I thought, I won't be able to do this. Like I'm going to get on stage and my throat's going to close and I'm going to pass out, or and I worked on that one thing with her. And after working for like 15 minutes, because here's the thing, Amanda, with this modality, you don't have to tell the story. You're not retelling. You don't even have to tell the person what you want to work on. In fact, that's the way it works, is you just label it, like the ice cream incident, or mean friends, or anything. You give it a title, and then you answer a few quantifying questions, and then you do it from there. So instead of like having to relive it all by telling the whole story again, you don't have to do that. But I did this with her around this because I was like, well, this is something that I really do want to work on, but it's not like, I don't feel like it's all the way going back to my childhood and like something even bigger. And after we did that, I was laughing because I could not pull that feeling up. And everyone kind of describes it the same, where it's like, there's a part of you that feels like, you know what, if I really, really tried, I bet you I could pull it. But then there's this like other part that's like, but why? Why would you want to feel that way again? Like this apathy that's like, I don't care, let it go. And I was like, I have to know more about this. I really have to learn more about this, because I've never seen anything that worked so quickly and so easily for people and gives people the power to start moving some of this stuff. So, and I think that what I've found is that some people, look, having a trust question, or being a little bit leery of something like that, like, well, what are you going to take my emotion, my feelings away? Are you going to take my memories away? Wait, who am I? Who am I without that? Because that created who I am. I had the same thoughts when we started going into deeper stuff, but what I realized was, no, I'm not losing the memory. I'm just losing the emotional charge that has affected me. And I felt so much lighter and so much like things more was possible. And that's really how a lot of the people I've been playing with this work with are saying, like, it was all of a sudden like just a lightness of being, because you took that weight off.
That's really helpful. I'm sold now. I'm sold.
So is that what
That's
your
cool.
therapist does? Does she do IEMT?
She doesn't do it, but she has been researching it, and a lot of her clients have been doing it. And she's like, this is incredible. I've never seen something, like you said, work so fast and be so effective. And, and so she's just like, this is something, and so she was, I call her my unofficial therapist, because she's a therapist and she's my friend, but she's my therapist. So she's my unofficial therapist, but she gave me a book on it, and then I started to read it, and it's just my mechanisms of like, no, don't, so, but it's way less scary now that you kind of explained what it is. And yeah, my mental picture of it was like, yeah, you sit down and like, let's dive into your trauma. Let's just
No.
fill it all out detail by detail, you know, walk away totally like fried. But no, that makes a lot of sense.
And you're in control. You're in control of
Yeah.
it. And I always ask
I like that.
yeah, you're in control. You're the driver. And I always ask clients, are you willing to release the energy around this? Because maybe sometimes you don't want to take it away. Sometimes it's important not to take it away. You know, if somebody's suddenly crying that never cried before because they suppressed, and now they're like, I want to take away crying. Well, is that in their best interest to do? Right? It's not there, or, you know, somebody might have had an abusive partner and they don't want to take away the negative feelings that they had about that because they feel like that's what's keeping them from getting in another abusive relationship. So you choose, you know, you think about if this is something that you want to release or not. And if you want to talk more about it, I'd be happy to at some point after this.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you for sure.
Does anybody have anything that they've been sitting on? Michelle, you were looked very lost in thought there for a minute.
Oh, sorry, I was distracted by something, but yeah, I mean, of course, like, I just, it's so interesting. I don't know. I don't know what to talk about specifically other than like, you know, I try to remember certain things and I'm like, wait, how did this happen? Like, it's like a weird thing that my memory does for traumatic moments. It's like, I'm like, I don't remember. Like, I remember me crying. I remember my stuff. I don't remember anything else about it. And I'm very intrigued by this. Thank you for writing it down, Lauren. IEMT. I'm very intrigued by it.
You know how I remember an acronym? Because it has to do with eye movement, right? So there's the eye. And then what's an EMT? It's like the guy in the ambulance coming to save you. So it's IEMT.
Got it. Yeah, no, and I'm in a weird point in my life where I'm processing a lot of old stuff. Yeah, it's like yeah, anyway, I'm curious about your IEMT. Save myself. I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like with the crying, like if we've done a lot of it, but we still have so much packed away because we released the pressure but didn't dig into the thing, then that's when we tend to believe more, if I unlock something, I'm always going to stay there, because we are staying there. Like, that is the reality of it. I have been staying there because I didn't dig deep enough. So our current reality is I'm just going to stay crying all the time, or I'm just going to not be able to feed my kids, take a shower, do anything, because that's where we see ourselves. If the floodgates unlocked, instead of saying that we're taking the whole lid off, we're taking everything out, even we don't have to talk about all of it, we can chuck it in the trash, some of it, you know, we're going to open it up. But so we can't see that there's another side of it. And as a person who walked through a huge chunk of shame the last 2.5 years, like, I thought that I wasn't gonna have, I couldn't see that there was another side of it, and I couldn't but I had cried about it a lot, you know, so that's, you can kind of get stuck there because it is the reality of the moment. Yes, you've been crying about this same thing for 10 years.
I think that crying is similar to loneliness, because both of those things cause us to have this, what if this is forever? Right? Oh God, I feel this pain, I'm crying. What if now this is who I am, right? Now I'm going to just be this sad crying person because I've connected to this. When we feel lonely, the thought process that comes up around loneliness, that when you ask people what they think when they feel lonely, is that, oh my God, I'm lonely. And then it's I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. I'm going to feel lonely for the rest of my life. It's the idea that this is where my state is going to be, not the truth, which is feeling lonely at times in your life is absolutely natural, and every person goes through it, no matter how many people they have around them, no matter how many people that love them, no matter it's not a reflection, but a natural feeling. So, and it doesn't last. But if you go, oh my gosh, I feel lonely, and then you start to build stories around feeling lonely as some type of representation of you and what's possible for you, and that this is the loneliness must mean something, that that I can never connect with people, or I'll never feel loved, or we put all this stuff on it. What if we just said, you know what, feeling lonely is normal, so when I feel lonely, I'm just going to have times when I feel that way.
And we have to be able to be honest enough with ourselves to say, where's my investment? Like, if my investment is I'm lonely, no one understands me, like I use that as armor. That was my shield for a long time. I'm so sensitive and no one understands me, so I can hermetize myself and blame everyone else. And I was invested in that. So it takes a lot to be able to figure out what your investment is. Maybe, maybe there's a reason you've stayed in something for 10 years, because if that is the investment of who you are, that is when you can sit back and go, if you're just saying, I'm just angry, or I'm just anxious, or this is just who I am, and if you throw a lot of adjectives around all those things, your investment is so big that you have to be willing to be like, who am I if I have a community? Who am I if I have people to call? Who am I if I have support? Who am I if I'm not the victim? Who am I if I'm not the martyr? And those can just be as scary, even though they sound so healthy, right? That sounds so healthy. I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm not going to be a martyr. And we say we want to know. Yeah, but if we're so heavily invested in that's who we are, those are really hard things to, pick apart and let go of.
So I think that to kind of recap on this whole riffing conversation that we've had, it's the idea that we really learning to cry well means that when you cry, when the feelings of crying come up, just really watch what judgments you have about it. Be that parent to your inner child, be that loving support, be the watcher of your feelings and your thoughts, and be able to say, okay, I see that I have negative feelings around crying, but this isn't from me. This was a societal indoctrination into the idea that crying is bad. Lean into the crying. Try to ask yourself, what am I crying about? Is it just the thing that's in front of me that I think is what made me cry? Or is it because this represents a familiar feeling that goes way back? Journal about your crying. Understand that crying releases oxytocin and what was the other one? Starts with an E. Anyway.
Endorphins.
Yes, endorphins. Yes. And helps you sleep and helps your immune system be stronger. There's all of these positives to crying. If you feel like you have a hard time crying, like you feel like you're carrying all this and you would love to be able to cry, but you struggle to be able to cry, then you have to start being your own detective and start looking for those little moments when a feeling may have been coming up and you used a coping skill of distraction, movement, whatever it is, to redirect so you didn't have to feel that. and just start trying to notice them. Doesn't mean that you'll be able to cry, but just notice them and starting to journal and to try to pull up what the feeling is. It may run away from you, you know, it may be fleeting, but just start working them. And if you get the gift of having something come up and you're able to cry in that moment and connect, take it. If you're in a situation where it's like, oh gosh, how am I going to go? Maybe go to the bathroom, excuse yourself, go to the bathroom and just let yourself cry in a stall. Do it. Because it's good for your mental state. It's good for your body. It's good for your health. It's good for everything. And we will actually be changing the unspoken shame around crying, the need to have other people stop crying, the need to feel like we don't cry and burden other people, and just start to see it as something that's absolutely normal and good and healthy. So we are okay with other people crying, and we're going to be okay with ourselves. And by doing that and being that example, hopefully other people get the message too. Thank you guys. This was a really good conversation. Thank you so much. And I hope you have an amazing month. And I will actually, we're going to have to move First Fridays next month because I'll be at the Journey On Podcast Summit. So we'll probably do the following Friday after the summit. Then we'll have lots to talk about.
That'll be great. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Good topic. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for showing
Next
up.
month.
Bye. See you next month. Bye.